I never imagined my own birthday would become the stage for the ultimate betrayal. But there I stood, champagne glass in hand, staring at my husband's pregnant mistress walking through the door arm in arm with my sister. The restaurant seemed to fall silent, though I'm sure conversations continued around us. It felt like someone had sucked all the oxygen from the room as our eyes locked across the private dining area of Harborview Restaurant. David, my husband of 8 years, froze beside me, his face draining of color faster than I could process what was happening. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Surprise! My sister Megan called out, her smile too wide, too knowing. The champagne in my glass trembled as my hand began to shake. I'd spent weeks planning this intimate gathering, inviting only our closest friends and family to celebrate my 35th birthday. Now it was unraveling in the most spectacular way possible. But let me tell you something about me, Rachel Wilson. I've never been one to create a scene, always the peacekeeper, always the one who smoothed things over. That night, however, something inside me finally snapped, and the announcement I made changed everything. 2 weeks before my birthday disaster, I was organizing files in our home office when I discovered the first clue. David had left his email, open on our shared computer. I wasn't snooping, we'd never been that couple, but a name caught my eye. Olivia. The subject line read, "Doctor's appointment confirmed." I stared at the screen, telling myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was work-related. David managed several female employees at his architectural firm. I shouldn't have clicked, but something in my gut pushed me forward. The message was brief, but devastating. Appointment scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m., 12-week ultrasound. Can't wait for you to see our baby. Love, O. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. 12 weeks. Our baby. The words burned into my retinas as I gripped the edge of the desk. David and I had been trying for a child for the past 3 years without success. 3 rounds of failed IVF had drained our savings and left emotional scars that were still healing. I took screenshots, sent them to my personal email, and closed everything just as I heard his key in the front door. That night, I lay beside him in bed, studying his sleeping face in the dim light filtering through our curtains. How could he look so peaceful while carrying such a secret? "I'm thinking of having my birthday dinner at Harborview," I said casually, over breakfast the next morning. "Something small, just family and close friends." David nodded, scrolling through his phone. "Sounds perfect. Just let me know the details so I can put it in my calendar." I watched him carefully, searching for signs of guilt or hesitation. There were none. 8 years together, and I couldn't read the lies on his face. That scared me more than anything. Later that day, I met my best friend Zoe at our favorite coffee shop. Her eyes widened as I slid my phone across the table, displaying the screenshots. "Holy shit, Rachel," she whispered. "Are you sure it's—" "What you think?" I nodded, my throat tight. "There are more emails, going back months. They met at a conference in Chicago last year. Have you confronted him?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to understand the full picture first." Zoe reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." What I needed was answers, and I knew exactly who might have them. My sister Megan had always been closer to David than to me. They shared the same dark humor, the same taste in obscure films. They texted regularly, had inside jokes. I'd always found it slightly uncomfortable, but told myself I was being paranoid. I called her that afternoon. "Hey, do you have time for coffee tomorrow? There's something I want to talk about." There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Sure, but it would have to be early. I have appointments all afternoon." We met at 8 a.m. in a different coffee shop, one closer to her downtown condo. Megan arrived looking immaculate as always, not a strand of her highlighted hair out of place. At 32, my younger sister had already made partner at her law firm, while maintaining the kind of polished appearance that made other women simultaneously envious and exhausted. "So, what's this about?" she asked after ordering an oat milk latte. "Wedding anniversary plans? David mentioned your 8th is coming up." I kept my face neutral. "Actually, I wanted to talk about my birthday. I'm planning something at Harborview. Small gathering. I'd like you to come." "Of course I'll come," she said, smiling. "Just send me the details." I stirred my coffee slowly. "There's one more thing. Do you know anyone named Olivia? Perhaps through David?" The micro-expression that flashed across her face was brief but unmistakable. Alarm. She recovered quickly. "Olivia? I don't think so. Why?" "Just curious. I thought I heard him mention someone by that name." Megan checked her watch. "I should get going. Early court appearance. But send me those birthday details, okay?" As she hurried away, I noticed she'd left her coffee mostly untouched. That evening, I scrolled through David's contacts while he showered. No Olivia. I checked his call history. Nothing suspicious. Either he was being incredibly careful, or he had a second phone. I felt dirty doing this, invading his privacy, but the alternative, continuing in ignorance, seemed worse somehow. The next clue came from the most unexpected source. Richard, my father-in-law, called me the following day. "Rachel, do you know if David's planning to come to our anniversary dinner next month? He hasn't RSVP'd, and he mentioned something about possibly being out of town." My stomach clenched. "Out of town? He hasn't mentioned any trips to me." There was an awkward pause. "Oh. Well, maybe I misunderstood. He said something about an overnight in Pinehurst with a client. Pinehurst was about 2 hours away, a quiet, upscale resort town known for its spas and golf courses, perfect for a romantic getaway." "I'll ask him and get back to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That night, I casually mentioned his parents' anniversary dinner. "Your dad called today. Wanted to know if we're going to their anniversary dinner next month." David nodded, not looking up from his laptop. I told him maybe. I might have that Pinehurst client meeting. "The overnight one?" I asked. His eyes flickered up to mine, then back to his screen. "Yeah, still waiting for confirmation." The ease with which he lied terrified me. Had it always been this way? Had I just never noticed? Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own marriage. I discovered credit card charges for jewelry I'd never seen, dinner reservations at restaurants we'd never visited together, and most damning of all, a lease agreement for an apartment in the Arts District downtown, co-signed by David and Olivia Palmer. I drove by the address one afternoon. It was a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and massive windows. Very expensive, very trendy, and only a 15-minute drive from his office. Convenient. I was sitting in my car across the street when a woman emerged from the building. She was tall, with a cascade of auburn hair, wearing a flowing summer dress that did nothing to hide her clearly pregnant belly. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen in several photos on social media. Photos where she'd been tagged with colleagues from David's firm at various events. Something inside me turned to ice as I watched her walk to a sleek black car parked nearby. She was beautiful. Yes, but it was more than that. She moved with a confidence I'd once possessed but had somehow lost in the past few years of fertility, treatments, disappointments, and growing distance in my marriage. I followed her, not entirely sure what I was doing. She drove to an upscale grocery store, parked, and went inside. Before I could talk myself out of it, I parked as well and followed her in. I found her in the produce section, carefully selecting avocados. Taking a deep breath, I approached. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Are you Olivia?" She turned, her expression curious but not alarmed. Yes? Do I know you? No, I said, but I believe you know my husband, David Wilson. The avocado in her hand fell to the floor as her face drained of color. Her free hand instinctively moved to her belly in a protective gesture. Rachel, she whispered. The fact that she knew my name shouldn't have surprised me. But somehow it did. It made the betrayal even more real. How far along are you? I asked, nodding toward her stomach. She swallowed hard. 14 weeks. 2 weeks had passed since the email I'd found. 14 weeks pregnant. While I'd been going through painful, expensive fertility treatments, my husband had been creating life with someone else. Does Megan know? The question clearly caught her off guard. Who? My sister, Megan Carter. Confusion crossed her face. I don't. I'm not sure who that is. Look, I think you should talk to David. But there was something in her expression, a flicker of recognition when I mentioned Megan's name. She was lying, but I couldn't tell about which part. I intend to, I said. But first, I'd like to invite you to my birthday dinner. Next Friday at Harborview Restaurant, 7 o'clock. Her eyes widened. What? I don't think that's a good idea? Probably not, but I insist. Consider it a gift to me. I walked away before she could respond, my heart hammering in my chest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had no idea if she would actually show up, but something told me she might. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with her role in this deception. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. I confirmed reservations at Harborview, sent out reminders to guests, and ordered a special cake from my favorite bakery, all while carrying the weight of what I knew and planning what I would say when the moment arrived. David noticed nothing amiss. He commented on how excited I seemed about my birthday, offered to help with arrangements, and continued to sleep peacefully beside me each night. The final piece fell into place the day before my birthday. I was having lunch with Natalie, a co-worker who had become a good friend, when she mentioned seeing Megan at a doctor's office. I didn't know you and your sister shared the same OB/GYN, she said between bites of salad. I frowned. We don't. Megan isn't pregnant. Natalie looked confused. That's weird. I could have sworn it was her. At Dr. Peterson's office? She was with a pregnant woman with reddish hair. They seemed pretty friendly. My fork clattered against my plate. Dr. Peterson was my gynecologist, the one who had guided me through all my failed fertility treatments, the one who knew every intimate detail of my reproductive history. When was this? I asked. Last Thursday, I think? Around 2 o'clock. The ultrasound appointment. 12-week ultrasound. My sister had gone with Olivia to my doctor. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so grotesque I could barely comprehend it. That night I made one final call, to my parents. Mom, I said when she answered, I need you and Dad to come to my birthday dinner tomorrow. It's important. Of course we'll be there, sweetheart. Is everything all right? It will be, I said, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. After tomorrow, everything will be very clear. The day of my birthday dawned bright and clear. I spent the morning at a spa, treating myself to a massage and facial. I had my hair styled, my nails done, and bought a new dress, a deep emerald, green that made my eyes look fierce and determined rather than sad and betrayed. David seemed genuinely appreciative when I emerged from our bedroom ready for the evening. You look incredible, he said, his eyes traveling over me in a way they hadn't in months. Thank you, I replied. Tonight is special. He had no idea just how special it would be. We arrived at Harborview early to make sure everything was perfect. The private dining room overlooked the water, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the sunset in all its glory. I had requested a specific seating arrangement, David at one end of the long table, me at the other, with strategic placement for everyone else. Guests began arriving. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Carter, looking elegant and happy. Zoe and her husband Jason, who gave me an extra long hug as if sensing I needed the support. Colleagues from work, including Natalie, who shot me a curious look I pretended not to notice. David's parents and his brother, a few other close friends. As 7 o'clock approached, the only people missing were Megan and the guest she didn't know I was expecting. And then it happened. The door to the private dining room opened, and there they stood, Megan, looking stunning in a fitted black dress, and beside her, Olivia, her pregnancy unmistakable in a flowing blue gown that accentuated rather than concealed her condition. The room didn't actually fall silent. Conversations continued, glasses clinked. But to me, it felt as though someone had hit mute on everything except the blood rushing in my ears. David's face, as I mentioned earlier, drained of all color. He stood halfway out of his chair, frozen in the act of rising for a toast someone had just proposed. "Surprise!" Megan called out, but her voice faltered as she took in my expression. The seating arrangement, the trap I had so carefully laid. I raised my champagne glass high, causing several people to do the same, thinking I was about to make a toast. Instead, I locked eyes with David across the length of the table and smiled. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with me tonight," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the now quieting room. "Especially our surprise guests. Megan, my dear sister, and Olivia, who is carrying my husband's child. Why don't you both take a seat? The show is just beginning." The gasps around the table were audible. David's mother put a hand to her mouth. My father half rose from his seat, confusion and anger warring on his face. "Rachel," David said, his voice strangled. "What are you doing?" I took a small sip of champagne, savoring the moment. "I'm celebrating my birthday by unwrapping the truth, David. Isn't that what birthdays are for? Gifts? And the truth is quite a gift, don't you think?" Megan had gone deathly pale, still standing in the doorway with Olivia. "Rachel, please, let's talk about this privately." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Privately? Like how you privately accompanied your brother-in-law's mistress to my doctor for ultrasound appointments? Or how you privately knew about their affair for months while looking me in the eye day after day?" My mother gasped. "Megan, is this true?" But I wasn't finished. I turned my attention to David, who remained frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of his own making. "Did you know, David, that I found the lease agreement? The one for the apartment you're sharing with Olivia? The same lease I noticed was co-signed by none other than Carter Legal Services." I turned to the room at large. That's my sister's law firm, in case anyone was wondering how deep this betrayal goes. Olivia had begun to cry silently, one hand protectively cradling her stomach. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Rachel," David finally found his voice. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Really?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean you didn't plan for me to discover your affair and secret love child through a series of emails, credit card statements, and chance encounters? How thoughtless of me to ruin your carefully planned reveal." The room had gone completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving, sensing the dramatic scene unfolding before them. "I think," I continued, setting down my glass with deliberate care, "that I'd like to make an announcement." I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope, which I placed on the table in front of me. Inside this envelope are divorce papers, already filed with the court. Also included is evidence of financial fraud, specifically how my husband diverted funds from our joint accounts to pay for his new life with Olivia. And finally, there's a detailed account of how my own sister, an officer of the court, helped facilitate this fraud while representing both parties in a clear conflict of interest. Megan's face crumpled. Rachel, no, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I interrupted. I'm sure you both can. But I'm no longer interested in explanations or excuses. What I am interested in is justice. I stood up, smoothing the front of my emerald dress. So here's my birthday announcement. As of today, I am divorcing David Wilson. I am severing all ties with Megan Carter. And I paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. I am starting a new life where loyalty and honesty are non-negotiable. The silence that followed was deafening. And in that moment, standing tall at my own birthday dinner surrounded by shocked faces and shattered relationships, I felt more powerful than I had in years. The next few minutes were chaos. David attempted to approach me, but my father intercepted him, physically blocking his path. Olivia collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly now. Megan tried to speak to our mother, who turned her back in a gesture so dismissive it made even me wince. I walked calmly to the door, pausing only to address the stunned gathering one last time. Please enjoy the dinner. Everything's been paid for, including the cake. I hear it's delicious. Red velvet with cream cheese frosting. My favorite. Or at least, it used to be. And with that, I walked out into the cool evening air, taking my first breath as a woman who would never again silence her own voice for the comfort of those who betrayed her. But what happened next? The confrontation in the parking lot, the shocking revelation about the baby, and how my parents chose to handle the situation. Well, that's where things really get interesting. That evening, I scrolled through David's contacts while he showered. No Olivia. I checked his call history. Nothing suspicious. Either he was being incredibly careful, or he had a second phone. I felt dirty doing this, invading his privacy, but the alternative, continuing in ignorance, seemed worse somehow. The next clue came from the most unexpected source. Richard, my father-in-law, called me the following day. Rachel, do you know if David's planning to come to our anniversary dinner next month? He hasn't RSVP'd, and he mentioned something about possibly being out of town. My stomach clenched. Out of town? He hasn't mentioned any trips to me. There was an awkward pause. Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood. He said something about an overnight in Pinehurst with a client. Pinehurst was about 2 hours away, a quiet, upscale resort town known for its spas and golf courses. Perfect for a romantic getaway. I'll ask him and get back to you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That night, I casually mentioned his parents' anniversary dinner. Your dad called today. Wanted to know if we're going to their anniversary. Dinner next month. David nodded, not looking up from his laptop. I told him maybe. I might have that Pinehurst client meeting. The overnight one? I asked. His eyes flickered up to mine, then back to his screen. Yeah, still waiting for confirmation. The ease with which he lied terrified me. Had it always been this way? Had I just never noticed? Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own marriage. I discovered credit card charges for jewelry I'd never seen, dinner reservations at restaurants we'd never visited together, and most damning of all, a lease agreement for an apartment in the Arts District downtown, co-signed by David and Olivia. Palmer. I drove by the address one afternoon. It was a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and massive windows. Very expensive, very trendy, and only a 15-minute drive from his office. Convenient. I was sitting in my car across the street when a woman emerged from the building. She was tall, with a cascade of auburn hair, wearing a flowing summer dress that did nothing to hide her clearly pregnant belly. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen in several photos on social media, photos where she'd been tagged with colleagues from David's firm at various events. Something inside me turned to ice as I watched her walk to a sleek black car parked nearby. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She moved with a confidence I'd once possessed, but had somehow lost in the past few years of fertility, treatments, disappointments, and growing distance in my marriage. I followed her, not entirely sure what I was doing. She drove to an upscale grocery store, parked, and went inside. Before I could talk myself out of it, I parked as well and followed her in. I found her in the produce section, carefully selecting avocados. Taking a deep breath, I approached. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Are you Olivia?" She turned, her expression curious but not alarmed. "Yes? Do I know you?" "No," I said, "but I believe you know my husband, David Wilson." The avocado in her hand fell to the floor as her face drained of color. Her free hand instinctively moved to her belly in a protective gesture. "Rachel," she whispered. The fact that she knew my name shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it did. It made the betrayal even more real. "How far along are you?" I asked, nodding toward her stomach. She swallowed hard. 14 weeks. 2 weeks had passed since the email I'd found. 14 weeks pregnant. While I'd been going through painful, expensive fertility treatments, my husband had been creating life with someone else. "Does Megan know?" The question clearly caught her off guard. "Who?" "My sister, Megan Carter." Confusion crossed her face. "I don't. I'm not sure who that is." "Look, I think you should talk to David." But there was something in her expression, a flicker of recognition when I mentioned Megan's name. She was lying, but I couldn't tell about which part. "I intend to," I said. "But first I'd like to invite you to my birthday dinner, next Friday at Harbor View Restaurant, 7 o'clock. Her eyes widened. "What? I don't think that's a good idea. Probably not. But I insist. Consider it a gift to me." I walked away before she could respond, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no idea if she would actually show up, but something told me she might. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with her role in this deception. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. I confirmed reservations at Harborview, sent out reminders to guests, and ordered a special cake from my favorite bakery, all while carrying the weight of what I knew and planning what I would say when the moment arrived. David noticed nothing amiss. He commented on how excited I seemed about my birthday, offered to help with arrangements, and continued to sleep peacefully beside me each night. The final piece fell into place the day before my birthday. I was having lunch with Natalie, a co-worker who had become a good friend when she mentioned seeing Megan at a doctor's office. "I didn't know you and your sister shared the same OB/GYN, she said between bites of salad. I frowned. "We don't. Megan isn't pregnant." Natalie looked confused. "That's weird. I could have sworn it was her. At Dr. Peterson's office? She was with a pregnant woman with reddish hair." They seemed pretty friendly. My fork clattered against my plate. Dr. Peterson was my gynecologist, the one who had guided me through all my failed fertility treatments. The one who knew every intimate detail of my reproductive history. "When was this?" I asked. "Last Thursday, I think? Around 2 o'clock. "The ultrasound appointment. 12-week ultrasound." My sister had gone with Olivia to my doctor. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so grotesque I could barely comprehend it. That night, I made one final call, to my parents. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I need you and Dad to come to my birthday dinner tomorrow. It's important." "Of course we'll be there, sweetheart. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. After tomorrow, everything will be very clear. The day of my birthday dawned bright and clear. I spent the morning at a spa, treating myself to a massage and facial. I had my hair styled, my nails done, and bought a new dress. Deep emerald green that made my eyes look fierce and determined rather than sad and betrayed. David seemed genuinely appreciative when I emerged from our bedroom ready for the evening. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes traveling over me in a way they hadn't in months. "Thank you," I replied. "Tonight is special." He had no idea just how special it would be. We arrived at Harborview early to make sure everything was perfect. The private dining room overlooked the water, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the sunset in all its glory. I had requested a specific seating arrangement, David at one end of the long table, me at the other, with strategic placement for everyone else. Guests began arriving, my parents, Eleanor and Richard Carter, looking elegant and happy. Zoe and her husband Jason, who gave me an extra long hug as if sensing I needed the support. Colleagues from work, including Natalie, who shot me a curious look I pretended not to notice. David's parents and his brother. A few other close friends. As 7 o'clock approached, the only people missing were Megan and the guest she didn't know I was expecting. And then it happened. The door to the private dining room opened, and there they stood, Megan, looking stunning in a fitted black dress, and beside her, Olivia, her pregnancy unmistakable in a flowing blue gown that accentuated, rather than concealed, her condition. The room didn't actually fall silent. Conversations continued, glasses clinked, but to me it felt as though someone had hit mute on everything except the blood rushing in my ears. David's face, as I mentioned earlier, drained of all color. He stood halfway out of his chair, frozen in the act of rising for a toast someone had just proposed. "Surprise!" Megan called out, but her voice faltered as she took in my expression. The seating arrangement, the trap I had so carefully laid. I raised my champagne glass high, causing several people to do the same, thinking I was about to make a toast. Instead, I locked eyes with David across the length of the table and smiled. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with me tonight," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the now quieting room. "Especially our surprise guests. Megan, my dear sister, and Olivia, who is carrying my husband's child. Why don't you both take a seat? The show is just beginning." The gasps around the table were audible. David's mother put a hand to her mouth. My father half rose from his seat, confusion and anger warring on his face. "Rachel," David said, his voice strangled. "What are you doing?" I took a small sip of champagne, savoring the moment. "I'm celebrating my birthday by unwrapping the truth, David. Isn't that what birthdays are for? Gifts? And the truth is quite a gift, don't you think?" Megan had gone deathly pale, still standing in the doorway with Olivia. "Rachel, please. Let's talk about this privately." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Privately? Like how you privately accompanied your brother-in-law's mistress to my doctor for ultrasound appointments. Or how you privately knew about their affair for months while looking me in the eye day after day." My mother gasped. "Megan, is this true?" But I wasn't finished. I turned my attention to David, who remained frozen, a deer caught in the headlights, of his own making. "Did you know, David, that I found the lease agreement? The one for the apartment you're sharing with Olivia? The same lease I noticed was co-signed by Carter Legal Services." I turned to the room at large. "That's my sister's law firm, in case anyone was wondering how deep this betrayal goes." Olivia had begun to cry silently, one hand protectively, cradling her stomach. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Rachel," David finally found his voice, "this isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Really?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean you didn't plan for me to discover your affair and secret love child through a series of emails, credit card statements, and chance encounters? How thoughtless of me to ruin your carefully planned reveal." The room had gone completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving, sensing the dramatic scene unfolding before them. I think, I continued, setting down my glass with deliberate care, that I'd like to make an announcement. I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope, which I placed on the table in front of me. Inside this envelope are divorce papers, already filed with the court. Also included is evidence of financial fraud, specifically how my husband diverted funds from our joint accounts to pay for his new life with Olivia. And finally, there's a detailed account of how my own sister, an officer of the court, helped facilitate this fraud while representing both parties in a clear conflict of interest. Megan's face crumpled. Rachel, no, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I interrupted. I'm sure you both can. But I'm no longer interested in explanations or excuses. What I am interested in is justice. I stood up, smoothing the front of my emerald dress. So here's my birthday announcement. As of today, I am divorcing David Wilson. I am severing all ties with Megan Carter. And, I paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. I am starting a new life where loyalty and honesty are non-negotiable. The silence that followed was deafening. And in that moment, standing tall at my own birthday dinner surrounded by shocked faces and shattered relationships, I felt more powerful than I had in years. The next few minutes were chaos. David attempted to approach me, but my father intercepted him, physically blocking his path. Olivia collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly now. Megan tried to speak to our mother, who turned her back in a gesture so dismissive it made even me wince. I walked calmly to the door, pausing only to address the stunned gathering one last time. Please enjoy the dinner. Everything's been paid for, including the cake. I hear it's delicious, red velvet with cream cheese frosting. My favorite, or at least it used to be. And with that, I walked out into the cool evening air, taking my first breath as a woman who would never again silence her own voice for the comfort of those who betrayed her. I made it halfway to my car before the tears finally came. Not gentle. Sad tears, but deep, angry sobs that tore through my chest like a physical pain. I fumbled with my keys, my vision blurred, when I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel, wait, please, Zoe called, running to catch up with me, her heels clicking against the pavement of the restaurant parking lot. I turned, wiping at my eyes. I'm fine, go back inside. She shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. I'm coming with you. She took the keys from my trembling hands. And I'm driving. I didn't argue. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I saw David burst through the restaurant doors, looking frantically in all directions. Our eyes met through the windshield for one brief moment before Zoe accelerated onto the main road. That, she said, after a long silence, was the most badass thing I have ever seen. A startled laugh escaped me. Not exactly how I imagined spending my 35th birthday. Where to? She asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I couldn't go home, not to the house I shared with David. Your place? I asked tentatively. Already planned on it, Zoe replied, taking the turn toward her neighborhood. Guest room is all yours for as long as you need it. At Zoe's apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto her sofa. She handed me a glass of whiskey, which I accepted gratefully. Did you know? I asked, after taking a long sip. About any of it? Zoe sat beside me, her expression serious. I suspected something was off with David, the way he'd been acting, at our dinner parties, how he always had an excuse not to join us. But Megan? No. That blindsided me completely. My phone had been buzzing continuously since we left the restaurant. I finally looked at it. 14 missed calls from David, 8 from Megan, 3 from my mother, 1 from my father, and dozens of text messages. I read a few from David. Please come home so we can talk. This isn't what you think. I never meant to hurt you. One from Megan caught my eye. "You've ruined everything. You had no right to do this." I laughed bitterly and showed it to Zoe, who read it and swore under her breath. "Block them," she advised. "At least for tonight." I nodded and did exactly that. Then I turned off my phone entirely. "What happens now?" Zoe asked softly. I stared into my whiskey glass. Now I follow through. The divorce papers weren't a bluff. I filed them yesterday. I've already contacted a financial advisor about separating our assets. And tomorrow, I'm calling the Ethics Board of the State Bar Association about Megan. Zoe's eyes widened. "You're really going to report her?" "She used her position as an attorney to help my husband defraud me," I said, my voice hardening. "She broke client confidentiality by sharing my medical information with Olivia. And she arranged for Olivia to see my doctor, probably hoping to use my history of fertility issues against me in a custody battle that hasn't even begun yet." "Jesus," Zoe whispered. "That's calculated," I finished for her. Megan has always been calculating. I just never thought she'd calculate against me. The events of the evening kept replaying in my mind. The looks on their faces when I exposed them. The silence that followed my announcement. The feeling of power that came from finally speaking my truth. But beneath it all was a deep, aching sadness for what I'd lost. Not just my marriage, but my family, my sense of safety, and the future I'd been planning. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, refilling my glass. "I spent 3 years trying to get pregnant. 3 years of hormone injections, invasive procedures, disappointment after disappointment. All while he was with her, creating the family I so desperately wanted." Zoe took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I know. It's not fair." "It's more than not fair," I said, a fresh surge of anger rising in me. "It's cruel. They used my pain against me. They watched me suffer and said, nothing." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a restless sleep on Zoe's couch. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of hushed voices. I sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where I was and why. I wrapped Zoe's throw blanket around my shoulders and padded toward the kitchen. Zoe was there with her husband, Jason, both of them falling silent when they saw me. "Morning," I said, my voice rough from sleep and crying. "There she is," Jason said, his smile gentle. "The woman of the hour. Coffee?" I nodded gratefully. "Please." As he poured me a cup, I caught them exchanging looks. "What is it?" I asked. Zoe hesitated, then slid her tablet across the counter to me. On the screen was Megan's Instagram page. She had posted a long statement about family misunderstandings and hasty judgments. The post was filled with comments offering support and condemning my public scene. "She's spinning it already," I said, unsurprised but still hurt. "There's more," Jason said, looking uncomfortable. "David's posted something too." I took a deep breath and nodded for him to show me. David's post was a picture of us from happier times, with a caption expressing his deep regret for the pain caused, and his hope that we could work through this difficult time privately. The comments were a mix of shock, support for him, and people asking invasive questions about what had happened. One comment in particular caught my eye, from Olivia. "Sending love and strength to you both during this challenging time." I pushed the tablet away, fighting a wave of nausea. They're trying to control the narrative, make me look like the villain. "It won't work," Zoe assured me. "Anyone who knows you knows better." But I wasn't so sure. Megan was a master manipulator, and David had always been charming. It was part of what had attracted me to him in the first place. Together, they could be formidable. "I need to get ahead of this," I said, pulling out my phone. I turned it on to find even more missed calls and messages. I ignored them all and opened my own social media accounts. I posted a simple statement. Last night, I discovered the extent of my husband's affair with a colleague and my sister's involvement in concealing it from me. I apologize to our guests who were caught in the crossfire, but I will not apologize for standing up for myself. I ask for privacy as I navigate this painful time. Within minutes, comments and messages of support began flooding in. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to offer help. Colleagues expressed their shock and solidarity. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. Then came a text from my father. "Your mother and I are coming over. We need to talk." I showed it to Zoe. "I should face them," I said, "but not at your place. This isn't your battle." She squeezed my shoulder. "It's our battle now. That's what friends are for." An hour later, my parents arrived at Zoe's apartment. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her normally perfectly styled hair disheveled. My father looked grim, his jaw set in a way I recognized from childhood confrontations. "Rachel," my mother began as soon as they were seated. "What you did last night?" "What I did?" I interrupted, incredulous. "What about what they did?" My father held up a hand. "Let your mother finish." I pressed my lips together, bracing myself for their disappointment, their inevitable defense of Megan, who had always been their favorite. "What you did last night," my mother continued, her voice steadier now, "was long overdue." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What?" My father nodded, reaching for my mother's hand. "We've been worried about your relationship with David for years. The way he treats you, the way he dismisses your feelings. We just didn't know how to bring it up without pushing you away." "And Megan," my mother added, her expression hardening, "has been hiding things from us too. Not just this affair, other things." "What things?" I asked. My parents exchanged looks. "Financial issues," my father said carefully. "Her firm is struggling. She's been asking us for money, claiming it was for various investments. We're beginning to think it was to help David in this." "Woman." I absorbed this information slowly. "You believe me? About all of it?" "Of course we do," my mother said, looking wounded. "You're our daughter. We know you wouldn't make something like this up." "But Megan is your daughter too," I pointed out. "And you've always taken her side." My father sighed deeply. "We've made mistakes, Rachel. We probably did favor Megan when you were growing up. She was more demanding, more insistent on getting attention. You were always so self-sufficient, so capable." "That doesn't make it right," I said, my voice catching. "No," my mother agreed, tears welling in her eyes. "It doesn't. And I am so sorry." The apology, unexpected and sincere, broke something, open inside me. I began to cry again, but this time it wasn't the angry, desperate sobbing of the night before. It was a release, a letting go of years of feeling second best. My parents moved to sit beside me, enveloping me in a hug that felt like coming home. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly seen by them. After they left, promising their full support with whatever came next, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The betrayal was still raw, the pain still fresh, but I was no longer alone in it. Zoe found me staring out her living room window, lost in thought. "You okay?" she asked. I turned to her with a small smile. "No, but I think I will be." That night, as I lay in Zoe's guest room trying to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was brief. "I need to talk to you, alone. It's about the baby. Olivia." I stared at the screen for a long time, my mind racing. What could she possibly have to tell me about the baby that would matter now? Was it another trap? A ploy to get me to meet with her so David could ambush me? But something about the message felt genuine, urgent. And despite everything, I found myself typing a response. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on 7th Street. Her reply came seconds later. I'll be there. Thank you. I lay back down, my heart pounding. Whatever Olivia had to tell me, I had a feeling it would change everything yet again. But this time, I was ready. This time, I would be the one in control. The truth, as painful as it had been, had set me free. And I wasn't about to let anyone cage me again. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of both entrances. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped my latte, rehearsing what I might say to the woman who was carrying my husband's child. What? Could Olivia possibly tell me that would matter now? The damage was done, the relationships shattered beyond repair. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see her. Auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that couldn't quite conceal her growing belly. Her eyes searched the shop until they landed on me. She hesitated for a moment before walking over, her posture tense, uncertain. Thank you for meeting me, Olivia said, sliding into the chair across from me. You said it was about the baby, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I'm listening. She looked down at her hands, twisting a silver ring around her finger. First, I want to say I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for what happened at your birthday dinner. Megan told me it was a celebration for you and David, that you wanted to make a public announcement about. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward her stomach. About your pregnancy, I finished for her. Megan led you to believe I already knew. Olivia nodded miserably. She said you were devastated at first but had come to accept it, that you wanted to make peace with the situation publicly. I laughed bitterly. And you believed that I would welcome my husband's mistress and their love child at my birthday dinner? She flinched at my words but didn't look away. It sounds absurd now, but you have to understand, David and Megan have been feeding me stories for months. About your marriage being effectively over. About you two staying together only for appearances. About how you were emotionally abusive. Emotionally abusive? I repeated, my voice rising. Several people glanced our way, and I forced myself to lower my tone. That's rich, coming from the two people who gaslit me while carrying on behind my back. I know, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I'm not here to defend them or myself. I made terrible choices, trusted the wrong people. But that's not what I need to tell you. I braced myself. Go on. Olivia took a deep breath. The baby. It's not David's. For a moment, I couldn't process her words. What? David isn't the father, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. And I can prove it. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this new information. If David isn't the father, then who is? And why would you pretend he was? She looked down again, shame coloring her cheeks. The father is James Harper. The name hit me like a physical blow. James Harper, David's business partner, a married man with 3 young children. The pieces started clicking into place. James and I had been seeing each other for almost a year, Olivia continued. When I found out I was pregnant, he panicked. Said he couldn't leave his wife, that it would ruin him financially and professionally. Then David found out about the affair. And offered to claim the baby as his, I finished, the grotesque picture becoming clear. But why would he do that? Olivia's answer was simple but devastating. Leverage. Over James, over the firm. And over me, I added, the final piece falling into place. My infertility gave him the perfect cover story. He could be the hero who finally gave me what I wanted most, a child, while using it to control his business interests. And Megan helped orchestrate the whole thing. Olivia nodded. Megan suggested using your doctor, said it would make the story more convincing if questions ever came up. She drew up papers for both James and David, protecting everyone except me, I said, my voice hollow. I was the only one who wasn't supposed to know the truth. Until the dinner, Olivia said. Your announcement changed everything. James is terrified you'll expose him next. David is scrambling to contain the damage. And Megan? She hesitated. What about Megan? Olivia slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a series of text messages between her and my sister, sent the night of my birthday dinner and into the early hours of the morning. Megan, this is a disaster. What did you tell her? Olivia, nothing. I barely spoke to her. Megan, she's threatening to report me to the ethics board. My entire career is at stake. Olivia, what should I do? Megan, nothing. Say nothing. Deny everything. I'll handle Rachel. I scrolled further, my heart pounding as I read the next exchange. Megan, we need to accelerate the plan. Get a paternity test ASAP showing David as the father. Olivia, but he's not the father. Any real test will show that. Megan, I know someone who can help with that. Just trust me. The last message from Megan sent a chill down my spine. If Rachel wants war, she'll get it. But remember who has more to lose. I handed the phone back to Olivia, my hands shaking with anger. Why are you showing me this? Why now? She placed a protective hand over her belly. Because I'm 4 months pregnant and suddenly realizing that I've aligned myself with people who are willing to falsify paternity tests and frame an innocent woman as emotionally abusive. What else are they capable of? What kind of environment am I bringing my child into? For the first time since meeting her, I felt a flicker of sympathy for Olivia. She was another pawn in their game, albeit one who had willingly played along until now. Do you have proof? I asked. That David isn't the father? She nodded. I had a private DNA test done last week, after I began to suspect Megan and David weren't being honest with me. I have the results in my email. I also saved all the messages between James and me and recordings of several conversations with David about the arrangement. You recorded him? I asked, surprised. I'm not as naive as they think, Olivia said, a hint of steel entering her voice. I knew from the beginning this could all blow up in my face. I needed insurance. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Why come to me with this? What do you want? Protection, she answered simply. From all of them. James would do anything to keep this from his wife. David and Megan have already shown they're willing to falsify legal documents and medical records. I'm scared, Rachel. I leaned back in my chair, processing everything she had told me. If what she said was true, and my instincts told me it was, then the betrayal was even more elaborate and twisted than I had initially thought. Send me everything, I said finally. The test results, the recordings, the messages. I'll have my lawyer review it all. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said, gathering my purse to leave. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because the truth matters, and because I refuse to let them get away with what they've done to either of us. As I stood to go, Olivia caught my wrist. Rachel, there's one more thing you should know. She hesitated, then continued. The night before your birthday, I overheard David and Megan talking. They mentioned something about financial adjustments they'd made to protect assets. David said something about offshore accounts. My blood ran cold. David had handled most of our finances throughout our marriage. I had trusted him completely, never questioning when he suggested investment strategies or joint accounts. Thank you for telling me, I said, my mind already racing with the implications. I'll be in touch. I walked out of the coffee shop with my head spinning. The depth of David and Megan's deception seemed bottomless. What had started as a painful revelation of infidelity had morphed into something far more sinister. A calculated conspiracy involving falsified documents, financial fraud, and potentially illegal activities. I called Zoe from my car. "I need a referral for the best forensic accountant you know," I said when she answered. "And possibly a security consultant." "Why? What happened?" Concern laced her voice. "I just met with Olivia. It's worse than we thought, Zoe. Much worse." By the time I returned to Zoe's apartment, I had made 3 important calls. One to my divorce attorney, one to a highly recommended forensic accountant, and one to a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. I felt like I was preparing for war, and in many ways I was. Zoe listened intently as I recounted my conversation with Olivia, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. "So the baby isn't even David's?" she asked, incredulous. "It's all been some elaborate scheme to manipulate you and secure David's position at the firm?" I nodded, a strange calm having settled over me. The initial shock and pain of betrayal had been replaced by something colder, more focused. "And to hide assets. I think they've been planning this for months, maybe longer. The affair may have been real at some point, but the pregnancy revelation was calculated." "What are you going to do?" I pulled out a notebook where I'd been jotting down action items. "First, secure all my personal financial information and set up accounts only I can access. Second, gather evidence of their conspiracy. Olivia has already agreed to provide what she has. Third, prepare legal action not just against David, but against Megan for professional misconduct." Zoe leaned forward. "And fourth?" I met her gaze steadily. "Expose everything." "Are you sure that's wise?" she asked gently. "It could get messy, painful." "It's already messy and painful," I replied. "But I refuse to be silenced by their threats or manipulations. If they want to paint me as the villain, then I'll show the world who they really are." Over the next few days, I worked methodically to build my case. The forensic accountant discovered multiple unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts to offshore holdings. My attorney confirmed that Olivia's recordings and evidence were legally obtained and could be used in court. The private investigator uncovered a trail of suspicious activities involving both David and Megan, including meetings with known financial fixers in the weeks leading up to my birthday. What surprised me most during this time was the outpouring of support I received, not just from Zoe and my parents, but from colleagues, friends, and even acquaintances who had witnessed David and Megan's behavior over the years. People came forward with stories. David's flirtations at company events, Megan's pattern of using confidential information for personal gain, small inconsistencies that, when viewed together, formed a damning picture. I was in the middle of reviewing financial documents with my accountant when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Rachel Wilson speaking," I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Diane Harper." The voice was tense, controlled. James Harper's wife. My heart skipped a beat. "Mrs. Harper, how can I help you?" "I think we need to talk," she said simply. "In person." We arranged to meet at a small park outside the city, a neutral location where we were unlikely to be recognized together. I arrived to find Diane already there, sitting on a bench near the pond. She was an elegant woman in her early 40s, with a composed demeanor that revealed nothing of the turmoil she must be feeling. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, as I sat beside her. "No handshake, no pleasantries." "Olivia spoke to you," I guessed. Diane nodded. "Yesterday. She told me everything. About the affair, the baby, the arrangement with your husband." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. Whatever my feelings toward Olivia, James, David, or Megan, Diane was another innocent party caught in their web of deception. "Don't be," she replied, her voice hardening. "I've suspected James was unfaithful for years. What I didn't know was the extent of the deception, or who else was involved." She turned to face me directly. "What are your intentions, Mrs. Wilson?" The question caught me off guard. "My intentions? With the information you have, do you plan to go public? Take legal action? I need to know what's coming so I can prepare. My children." Her directness was refreshing after weeks of lies and manipulation. "I plan to file for divorce on grounds of fraud and financial deception," I said. "I intend to report my sister to the Bar Association for ethical violations. And yes, I will likely need to use the evidence I have regarding James and Olivia to support my case." Diane absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "I see. And if I asked you to keep my children out of it as much as possible?" "I have no desire to hurt your family, Mrs. Harper," I assured her. "My fight isn't with you or your children." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then perhaps we can help each other." "How so?" "I've been documenting James's financial indiscretions for years," she said, opening her purse and removing a flash. "Drive. Suspicious withdrawals, unexplained expenses, conversations overhead. I was gathering evidence for a potential divorce. But what I've found goes beyond our marriage. There are irregular transactions between Harper and Wilson Architecture and several shell companies that appear to be laundering money." I stared at the flash drive she held out to me. "You're giving this to me? Why?" "Because you have the courage to fight openly, while I need to protect my children from public scandal," she said simply. "Use it however you see fit. All I ask is that you give me advance notice before anything becomes public, so I can prepare my family." I accepted the flash drive, stunned by this unexpected alliance. "Thank you. I'll honor your request." As we parted ways, Diane added one final thought. "They underestimated us both, Mrs. Wilson. Let's make sure they never make that mistake again." By the time I returned to Zoe's apartment, my resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. The pieces were all coming together. Olivia's evidence of the fake paternity arrangement, Diane's financial documents, my own discoveries about missing assets, and the growing collection of witness statements attesting to David and Megan's character and conduct. I was reviewing everything with my attorney when my phone buzzed with a text from David. "We need to talk, please. I miss you. Come home." I showed it to my lawyer, who frowned. "Don't respond. At this point, any communication should go through me." I nodded, but the text continued to nag at me throughout the evening. Not because I was tempted to reconcile, that bridge had been thoroughly burned, but because it represented a shift in tactics. After days of threatening messages and attempts to intimidate me through mutual friends, David was now trying a softer approach, which meant he was getting desperate. My suspicion was confirmed the next morning when Zoe burst into the guest room where I was working. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was a post from Megan, accompanied by a photo of her comforting a seemingly distraught David. The caption read, "Standing by family during mental health crises isn't always easy, but it's essential. Sending love and healing thoughts to my brother-in-law as he navigates this difficult time." Mental health awareness. Family support. The comments were filled with sympathetic messages and thinly veiled references to me as the cause of his supposed breakdown. "They're setting the stage," I said, anger burning through me, trying to discredit anything I might say by painting me as the unstable wife who abandoned her mentally ill husband. Zoe sat beside me on the bed. "It's despicable, but not unexpected." I scrolled through more comments, noting several from mutual friends expressing concern and offering support to David. People who hadn't bothered to check on me or hear my side of the story. "Well, two can play at this game," I said, reaching for my phone. Rachel, wait, Zoe cautioned. Don't sink to their level. I paused, considering her words. You're right. Social media battles won't solve anything. But I'm done being reactive. It's time to take control of this narrative. Instead of posting a response, I made 3 calls. The first was to my attorney, instructing him to send formal cease and desist, letters to both David and Megan regarding defamatory statements. The second was to a reporter at the local newspaper who had previously covered business ethics stories. I arranged a meeting to discuss potential financial irregularities at Harper and Wilson Architecture. The third was to David's parents. Rachel, my mother-in-law answered, surprise evident in her voice. We've been so worried about you. I'm sure David has told you his version of events, I said, keeping my tone even. But before you form any final judgments, I'd like to meet with you and Mr. Wilson. There are things you need to know. There was a pause, then, of course, dear. When? We arranged to meet that afternoon at their home. I spent the intervening hours organizing the evidence I wanted to share with them. Not everything, but enough to show the deliberate nature of David and Megan's deception. David's parents lived in a stately Tudor home in one of the city's older neighborhoods. I'd always felt comfortable there, welcomed as the daughter they never had. Now, as I approached their front door, I wondered if that relationship too had been irreparably damaged. Margaret Wilson opened the door, her usually warm smile replaced by a look of concern. Rachel, come in. Robert is in the study. I followed her through the familiar hallways, noting the family photos still prominently displayed, including several of David and me on our wedding day. The sight sent a pang through my heart, not of longing, but of loss. Mourning for the life I thought I had. Robert Wilson rose from his armchair as we entered, his expression grave. Rachel, thank you for coming. I nodded, taking a seat across from him. Thank you for being willing to hear me out. Before you begin, Margaret said, sitting beside her husband, we want you to know that we love you. Whatever has happened between you and David doesn't change that. The sincerity in her voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away, focusing on why I had come. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, I began. But I believe you deserve the truth, especially given what David and Megan have been saying publicly. Over the next hour, I laid out the facts as I knew them. The affair, the false pregnancy claim, the financial deceptions, the coordinated efforts to manipulate and discredit me. I showed them key pieces of evidence, emails, financial records, Olivia's statement, but spared them the most painful details. Throughout my explanation, they remained silent, their expressions shifting from disbelief to horror to profound sadness. When I finished, Robert spoke first. If what you're saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt you, then the son we raised is not the man sitting in that house right now. Margaret reached for my hand. Rachel, I am so sorry for what he's done to you, for what you've endured, and for whatever part we may have played in creating a person capable of such deception. You didn't create this, I said gently. David made his choices. So did Megan. Robert shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. Using another man's child as a pawn? Manipulating you after everything you've been through with the fertility treatments? It's unconscionable. What will you do now? Margaret asked. Proceed with the divorce, I answered. Expose the financial irregularities at the firm? Beyond that, I'm still deciding. Robert and Margaret exchanged a look before he spoke again. We want you to know that we support you. Whatever you need to do, whatever becomes public, we understand. Our relationship with you doesn't have to end because your marriage did. Their support, so unexpected and complete, broke something open inside me. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, I allowed myself to cry openly, not the angry tears of the birthday dinner, or the shocked tears of the revelations that followed, but tears of relief. Relief that not everything in my life had been a lie, that there were still people I could trust. As I left their home, Margaret hugged me tightly. "Stay strong, dear, and remember, family isn't always blood." Those words stayed with me as I drove back to Zoe's apartment. Family isn't always blood. The comfort I had found in David's parents stood in stark contrast to the betrayal by my own sister. The relationships I thought were permanent had shattered, while unexpected alliances had formed with people like Diane Harper and the Wilsons. When I arrived at Zoe's, I found her sitting at the kitchen counter with a strange expression on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. She slid her phone across to me. On the screen was a text from an unknown number. "Tell Rachel to check her email. She'll want to see this. Oh." I quickly pulled out my laptop and opened my email. There, at the top of my inbox, was a message from Olivia with the subject line, "Urgent. They know I spoke to you." The email contained screenshots of a conversation between David and Megan, dated just hours earlier. David: "Olivia's not answering my calls. I think she's talking to Rachel." Megan: "Are you sure?" David: "Someone saw them at the coffee shop on 7th. Megan: "Damn it. We need to move everything now. Before Rachel's lawyer finds it." David: "Already on it. What about the Harper situation?" Megan: "I'm handling it. James is terrified his wife will find out. He'll do whatever we say." David: "And Rachel?" Megan: "Leave her to me. By the time I'm done, no one will believe a word she says." The final message from Megan sent ice through my veins. "If necessary, we can always use the material from her therapy sessions. Dr. Levine keeps detailed notes." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Dr. Levine was my therapist, whom I had started, seeing after our second failed IVF attempt. The sessions were deeply personal, filled with my fears, insecurities, and darkest moments, and Megan was threatening to use them against me. How could she even access those? Zoe asked, reading over my shoulder. It hit me like a thunderbolt. The authorization forms. When I started therapy, I needed to provide insurance information. Megan offered to help with the paperwork since it was through her firm's health plan. She must have added herself as an authorized party for medical records. Zoe swore under her breath. "That's beyond unethical. It's illegal." "And exactly the kind of leverage they think will silence me," I said, a cold determination settling over me. "They're wrong." I forwarded the email to my attorney with a brief message. "Time to accelerate our timeline. They're moving assets and planning to use confidential therapy notes against me." His response came within minutes. On it. "Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office, bringing the forensic accountant and a colleague who specializes in privacy law violations." I set down my phone, feeling the weight of the coming battle. David and Megan were pulling out all the stops, willing to violate ethical boundaries, professional standards, and possibly laws to protect themselves and maintain control. But they had overlooked something crucial. With each new revelation, each escalation, they were only making my case stronger, and unlike them, I had nothing left to hide. That night, as I lay awake planning my next moves, I received one more text, this time from Diane Harper. "James just got home in a panic. Something big is happening at the firm tomorrow. Thought you should know." The game was changing. David and Megan were making their move, but so was I. And this time, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. I arrived at my attorney's office 15 minutes early, dressed in a crisp navy suit I'd purchased the day before. No more borrowed clothes or living out of a suitcase at Zoe's place. I'd finally rented a small furnished apartment for myself, a concrete step toward my new independent life. Marcus Chen, my divorce attorney, greeted me with a firm handshake. Rachel, I'd like you to meet Vivian Torres, our privacy law specialist, and Derek Walsh, the forensic accountant who's been analyzing your financial records. We settled into the conference room, its panoramic windows offering a view of the city skyline. The same city where somewhere, right now, David and Megan were orchestrating their countermoves. First, Marcus began, placing a folder on the table. The good news. The evidence you've provided, combined with Ms. Palmer's testimony and the financial records from Mrs. Harper, gives us a substantial case for fraud, not just infidelity. This significantly strengthens our position in the divorce proceedings. And the therapy records? I asked, the thought of my most vulnerable moments being weaponized still making my stomach churn. Vivian leaned forward. I've already filed an emergency petition to block any disclosure or use of those records. I've also sent formal notifications to Dr. Levine and his practice about the potential breach. If Megan attempts to access or use those records, she won't just face civil penalties. She could be criminally liable. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Now for the concerning news, Derek said, opening his laptop. Based on the transaction history I've reconstructed, approximately $2. $4 million has been moved from accounts connected to you and David in the past 3 months. Some of these transfers were disguised as business investments, others as personal expenses. But they all lead to the same place, a network of shell companies with connections to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My mouth went dry. 2.4 million? That's more than half of our joint assets. Marcus nodded grimly, which suggests they've been planning this for some time. The good news is that we can trace the money. The bad news is that recovering it could be complicated, especially if they've moved it beyond U.S. jurisdiction. There's something else, Vivian added. A colleague at the courthouse tipped me off this morning. Megan has filed a petition for a temporary restraining order against you. A restraining order? I echoed, stunned. On what grounds? She's claiming harassment and emotional distress, alleging that you've been making threatening calls and sending intimidating messages to both her and David. I shook my head in disbelief. That's absurd. I haven't contacted either of them directly since the birthday dinner. All communication has been through you. We know, Marcus assured me, and we can prove it with phone records and witness statements. It's a desperate tactic, likely designed to damage your credibility before we go public with what we know. The sheer audacity of their lies ignited a fresh wave of anger in me. So what's our next move? Marcus exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering. We strike first, today. We've prepared a comprehensive filing detailing the financial fraud, the paternity deception, and Megan's ethical violations. Once filed, it becomes public record, accessible to the media, the State Bar Association, and anyone else who might be interested. Including Harper and Wilson's clients and investors, Derek added meaningfully. I considered this for a moment. Going public would be like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. The explosion would be immediate and far-reaching, affecting not just David and Megan, but potentially innocent employees at the firm, David's parents, maybe even Diane and her children despite our best efforts to shield them. Before we proceed, Marcus said gently, you need to be absolutely certain. Once this information is public, there's no going back. The scrutiny will be intense, for everyone involved. I thought of David's post painting himself as a victim of mental health struggles, of Megan threatening to expose my therapy sessions, of their coordinated efforts to discredit and silence me while stealing my financial security. File it, I said decisively. All of it. Marcus nodded, reaching for his phone. I'll have my assistant submit everything immediately. What about Diane Harper? I asked. I promised to warn her before anything went public. Call her now, Vivian suggested. She should have a few hours to prepare her family before the media picks this up. I stepped into a private office to make the call, Diane answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Harper, it's Rachel Wilson. You're moving forward today," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I wanted to give you notice as promised." There was a brief silence, then a resolute, "Thank you. We're ready." As I hung up, I wondered what ready meant for her family. Had she already told her children about their father's infidelity? Had she made plans to leave James? I hoped whatever path she chose would bring her peace. When I returned to the conference room, the energy had shifted. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of machinery being set in motion that couldn't be stopped. "It's done," Marcus said. "The filing has been submitted. Now we wait." We didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, my phone began lighting up with notifications. The local business journal had picked up the story first, publishing an article with the headline, "Fraud Allegations Rock Harper and Wilson Architecture. Co-founder accused of financial misconduct and personal deception." More calls and texts flooded in, friends expressing shock and support, colleagues seeking confirmation, and several numbers I didn't recognize, likely reporters looking for comments. I silenced my phone, focusing instead on the next phase of our strategy. "We should expect immediate retaliation," Vivian warned. "Megan will likely accelerate her restraining order petition, and David may attempt to access any remaining joint accounts or assets." "Already handled," Derek assured us. "As of this morning, Rachel has sole control of her personal accounts, and we've placed holds on all joint assets pending court resolution." Marcus's assistant knocked before entering the conference room. "Excuse me, but there's someone here insisting on seeing Ms. Wilson." "A Mr. Wilson? Robert Wilson." "He says it's urgent." I frowned. "David's father? Did he say what it's about?" "Just that it couldn't wait." Her expression was apologetic. "He seems quite agitated." I exchanged looks with Marcus, who nodded cautiously. "I'll stay with you if you want to see him." "That's all right," I decided. "I'll speak with him alone." Robert Wilson looked every bit his 70 years as he entered the room, his normally impeccable posture slightly stooped, his face drawn with worry. Marcus and his team discreetly exited, leaving us alone. "Rachel," he began, his voice strained. "I just got a call from the bank. Nearly $3 million is missing from our retirement accounts." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "What?" He sank into a chair, passing a hand over his face. "David had power of attorney for our finances, has had it for years. I never questioned it. He's our son, for God's sake." His voice broke on the last word. "The bank flagged unusual transfers over the past week. When I called to inquire, they told me the funds had been moved to an investment opportunity that I supposedly approved. I never approved anything." My mind raced. David hadn't just stolen from me, he'd stolen from his own parents. "Margaret doesn't know yet," Robert continued. I couldn't tell her that our son has left us with almost nothing for our remaining years. The depth of David's betrayal was staggering. He hadn't just lied and cheated. He had systematically destroyed everyone who trusted him. "Robert," I said gently, "my team has been tracking David's financial activities. We've uncovered a pattern of fraudulent transfers, including the money from your accounts. We can help you recover it." Hope flickered in his tired eyes. "You would do that? After everything?" "Of course," I said without hesitation. "This isn't about our marriage anymore. It's about justice, for all of us." I introduced Robert to Derek, who immediately began gathering details about the Wilsons' accounts. As they worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Turn on channel." Now. I found a television in an adjacent meeting room and switched it on. The local news was running a live segment outside Harper and Wilson Architecture. The reporter's voice was grave. "Allegations of financial mismanagement and personal misconduct have sent shockwaves through the business community. Sources say that federal investigators have now entered the Harper and Wilson offices with warrants related to potential wire fraud and tax evasion. We're attempting to get statements from the firm's partners. The camera panned to show several suited men and women entering the building, their expressions grim and purposeful. Federal investigators. This was moving faster than I had anticipated. My phone rang. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You vindictive bitch." Megan's voice was ice cold. "Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything." "You destroyed it yourself, Megan," I replied calmly. "I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you've done. This goes beyond David and me, beyond the firm. There are people involved who won't take kindly to having their business exposed." A chill ran down my spine. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You think you've won? This is just beginning. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, unsettled by the menace in my sister's voice. It sounded like more than the desperate bluster of someone caught in their lies. It sounded like genuine fear, not of me, but of something else. I returned to the conference room where Marcus was now on his own phone call, his expression increasingly concerned. When he hung up, he turned to me with grave eyes. That was my contact at the district attorney's office. The investigation into Harper and Wilson isn't just about financial improprieties within the firm. They're looking at potential connections to money laundering for a real estate developer with known ties to organized crime. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Are you saying David and James were laundering money for criminals? It's possible they didn't know the full extent of it, Marcus replied carefully. But ignorance won't be much of a defense if they were moving illegal funds, even unwittingly. This explained Megan's warning. If David and the firm were entangled with dangerous people, exposing their financial schemes could have repercussions beyond legal troubles. Should I be worried? I asked bluntly. Marcus didn't sugarcoat his response. Until we know exactly who's involved and how deep this goes, it would be prudent to take precautions. I'm going to arrange for private security for you. The day that had started with a strategic legal offensive had evolved into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. By exposing David and Megan's betrayal, I had inadvertently pulled at a thread that was unraveling a much larger tapestry of deception. As I was processing this new reality, Derek returned with Robert Wilson. We've initiated the process to freeze the transferred funds, Derek reported. The bank is cooperating fully, especially in light of the federal investigation. There's a good chance we can recover most of Mr. Wilson's money. Relief softened Robert's worried features. Thank you, both of you. I don't know what Margaret and I would have done. I squeezed his hand. Go home to her. Tell her everything. And please, stay safe. After Robert left, I turned to Marcus. I need to warn Diane Harper. If her husband is involved in money laundering, she and her children could be at risk. Before I could make the call, my phone lit up with another text, this time from Olivia. David just showed up at my apartment. He's furious. Says I betrayed him. I'm scared. I need to go, I told Marcus, showing him the message. Olivia could be in danger. Absolutely not, he objected firmly. If David is desperate and angry, the last person he should see is you. Let me call the police to do a welfare check on Ms. Palmer. There's no time, I argued. Her apartment is 10 minutes from here. The police could take longer, especially if they don't consider it an emergency. Then I'm coming with you, Marcus insisted, and we're calling the police on the way. We compromised. Marcus would follow in his car while I drove directly to Olivia's building. I would wait for him in the lobby before going up to her apartment. And we would both call 911 if there was any sign of trouble. The drive to Olivia's upscale apartment building was tense. The city streets seemed unusually congested, each red light an eternity. I tried calling Olivia twice, but she didn't answer, increasing my anxiety. When I arrived at her building, I was surprised to find the front entrance unattended. The lobby, usually staffed by a security guard or doorman, was empty. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach as I approached the elevator. I hesitated, remembering my promise to wait for Marcus. But another text from Olivia decided me. Please hurry. He won't leave. I took the elevator to the 12th floor, my heart pounding as the doors opened onto a hushed hallway. Olivia's apartment was at the end, with a view of the city park below. As I approached her door, I heard raised voices from inside. David's angry tone, followed by Olivia's pleading response. I knocked firmly. The voices abruptly ceased. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal David, his face flushed with anger, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. His expression shifted from rage to shock, to a calculating coldness when he saw me. Rachel, what a surprise. Coming to check on your new friend? I kept my voice steady. I'm here to make sure Olivia is safe. He laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. Safe? From what? Me? I'm not the threat here. He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter with mock politeness. Please, come in. We were just discussing how thoroughly you've ruined all our lives. I stepped cautiously into the apartment, scanning for Olivia. She was standing by the living room window, her arms wrapped protectively around her pregnant belly, her face pale with fear. Are you okay? I asked her directly, ignoring David. She nodded slightly, her eyes darting nervously between David and me. She's fine, David snapped. I just came to understand why she would betray me by talking to you, after everything I did for her. You mean after you offered to claim another man's child to manipulate your business partner and defraud your wife? I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. That kind of everything? David's face darkened. You have no idea what you've done. The people James was involved with, they don't handle exposure well, and now the feds are crawling all over our firm, our accounts, our lives. You involved yourself with criminals, David. That's on you, not me. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Do you think this ends with divorce papers and asset divisions? These people don't care about legal proceedings. They care about their money and their secrets. Are you threatening me? I asked, my phone in my hand, finger hovering over the emergency call button. I'm warning you, he hissed, for your own good. Even now, after everything, I don't want to see you hurt. The audacity of his claim, that he cared about my well-being after systematically betraying me, ignited my anger. You don't want to see me hurt? You've done nothing but hurt me, David. You lied to me, cheated on me, stole from me, and now you have the nerve to stand here and say you care? You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut him off. You're scared. Not for me, but for yourself. The house of cards is collapsing, and you're desperate to find a way out. His expression confirmed my assessment. Behind the anger was naked fear. David, who had always been so controlled, so confident, was coming apart at the seams. What? Do you want, Rachel? He asked finally. Money? I can get it back. Most of it anyway. We can make a deal. I stared at him, almost pitying his desperation. I don't want a deal. I want justice. For me, for your parents, yes, I know you stole from them too, and for anyone else you've hurt along the way. The mention of his parents seemed to hit him hard. For a moment, genuine shame flashed across his face. My parents? How did you... Your father came to me today, I told him. He knows everything, David. Everyone knows everything. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He sank onto Olivia's sofa, burying his face in his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he murmured. It was just supposed to be a simple arrangement. Business. But then James got in too deep with Castellano, and everything spiraled. Castellano. The name clicked in my memory. Vincent Castellano, a real estate magnate rumored to have connections to organized crime. His developments had been in the news recently due to questionable financing and alleged violations of building codes. Castellano is the developer you were laundering money for, I said, the pieces falling into place. David looked up sharply. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Saying it out loud won't help anyone." A knock at the door made us all jump. David was on his feet instantly, his expression panicked. "Who is that? Did you bring someone with you?" "It's probably my attorney," I said calmly. "I told him I was coming here." Olivia moved to answer the door, but David grabbed her arm. "Wait, it could be them." The fear in his voice was genuine. Whoever they were, David was terrified of them. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Rachel, it's Marcus. Are you in there? The police are on their way." David's grip on Olivia's arm loosened. She pulled away from him and hurried to the door, opening it to reveal not just Marcus, but 2 uniformed police officers as well. "Is everything all right here?" one of the officers asked, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. "Yes," I said, relief washing over me. "Mr. Wilson was just leaving." David straightened his jacket, composing his features into a mask of dignified calm. "Of course, we've said all that needs to be said." He moved toward the door, pausing beside me to murmur, "This isn't over, Rachel. One way or another, we'll all pay for what's happened today." I watched him walk out, escorted by one of the officers, while the other remained to take statements from Olivia and me. As the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, I felt a bone-deep exhaustion settle over me. "Are you really okay?" I asked Olivia when the police had gone, leaving us with Marcus. She nodded, but her hands were still shaking. He wasn't violent, just intense, desperate. I've never seen him like that before. "Did he mention Castellano to you before today?" Marcus asked her. "Not by name," she replied, "but he's been increasingly anxious about business associates in the past few weeks, especially since—" She trailed off, looking at me apologetically. "Since my birthday dinner," I finished for her, when everything started unraveling. Marcus checked his watch. "We should go. The DA's office has called an emergency meeting about the Harper and Wilson investigation. They want to speak with you, Rachel, as a material witness." I turned to Olivia. "Will you be all right here? You could come with us or go somewhere else for a while." She hesitated, then nodded. "I think I'll call my sister in Denver. Maybe stay with her until things settle down." "That's a good idea." I agreed, relieved she wouldn't be alone. As we prepared to leave, Olivia caught my arm. "Rachel, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but when you speak to the authorities, could you make it clear that I cooperated? That I came forward with the truth?" I studied her face, remembering how she had appeared at my birthday dinner on Megan's arm, unknowingly playing a role in their elaborate deception. She had made poor choices, certainly, but she had also been manipulated and lied to, just as I had been. "I'll make sure they know," I promised. The meeting at the district attorney's office was intense. I spent hours answering questions about David and Megan's activities, sharing everything I had discovered about the financial irregularities and the elaborate deception surrounding Olivia's pregnancy. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Vasquez, was particularly interested in the timeline of financial transfers and any mentions of Castellano or his developments. "Your husband and his partner were moving substantial sums through a series of shell companies," she explained, showing me a complex diagram of financial flows. "Most of it appears to have been laundered funds from Castellano's development projects. We believe they were hiding both the source of the funding and the actual costs of construction, allowing for substandard materials and practices while charging premium prices." "Did they know?" I asked. that they were participating in money laundering? Vasquez's expression was non-committal. That's what we're trying to determine. At minimum, they were willfully blind to obvious red flags. At worst, they were active participants in a criminal enterprise. By the time I left the DA's office, night had fallen over the city. Marcus offered to drive me to my new apartment, concerned about David's parting words and the potential threat they represented. "We've arranged for security at your building," he assured me, "just until we have a clearer picture of the risks." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. The day had been a roller coaster of confrontations, revelations, and legal maneuvers. All I wanted now was to sleep, to find a few hours of peace before facing whatever tomorrow would bring. As we drove through the quiet streets, Marcus updated me on the latest developments. The restraining order petition has been dismissed, by the way. The judge saw right through Megan's fabrications, and the Bar Association has opened a formal investigation into her conduct. "And David?" I asked. "Still being questioned by federal investigators, last I heard. His attorney has been trying to negotiate some kind of immunity deal in exchange for cooperation against Castellano." I laughed humorlessly. "Of course he has. David always finds a way to save himself." "Not this time," Marcus said firmly. "The evidence is too substantial, the charges too serious. Best case scenario for him is a reduced sentence, not a free pass." We pulled up to my building, where a security guard was already positioned in the lobby. Marcus insisted on walking me to my door, checking the apartment before leaving me alone. "Try to get some rest," he advised, his concern evident. "Tomorrow will be another long day." After he left, I stood in the center of my new space, a small, modern apartment with minimal furnishings and none of the personal touches that had made my house with David a home. It was a blank slate, just like my life had become. I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, David was facing the consequences of his actions. Megan was watching her carefully constructed reputation crumble. James was probably making his own desperate deals with prosecutors. And Olivia was fleeing to the safety of her sister's home. All of us, scattered like pieces from a board game that had been overturned in anger. The comfortable lives we had, known or thought we had known, were gone forever. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Just checking in. You okay?" I started to type, "I'm fine," the automatic response I'd given so many times over the years. Then I paused, recognizing the habit for what it was. A shield, a way of keeping people at a safe distance even when I was falling apart inside. Instead, I wrote, "It's been a hard day, but I'm standing. Call you tomorrow." Her response came immediately. "Proud of you. Always here when you need me." I set down my phone and moved to the small kitchen, making myself a cup of tea. As I waited for the water to boil, I noticed my reflection in the window, a woman I barely recognized. Thinner, certainly, with shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. But something else had changed too. There was a strength in my posture, a certainty in my gaze that spoke of battles fought and wounds survived. The woman staring back at me from the glass had lost much, but she had gained something precious in return. The knowledge of her own. Resilience, her capacity to face betrayal and emerge not broken, but remade. The kettle whistled, pulling me from my reverie. As I poured the steaming water into my mug, I allowed myself a small smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, perhaps even new dangers. But for tonight, in this quiet moment of reflection, I had won. Not just the legal battles or the moral high ground, but the most important victory of all. I had reclaimed myself. 6 months can change everything. As spring blossomed across Lakeside Springs, I stood in front of the courthouse steps, the weight of the past half year visible in the journalists gathered with their cameras and microphones. The verdict had just been announced. David and James had been found guilty on multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. My testimony had been crucial in securing the conviction. "Ms. Wilson, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called out as I descended the steps. I paused, considering my words carefully. Justice was served today, not just for me, but for everyone affected by their actions. Now we can all begin to heal and move forward. My attorney, Marcus, gently guided me through the crowd toward his waiting car. Once inside, I finally allowed myself to exhale fully. It was over. The trial that had consumed weeks of my life, forcing me to relive every painful detail of David's betrayal in the most public way possible, had reached its conclusion. "You did it," Marcus said, a note of pride in his voice. "Your testimony was unimpeachable." I gazed out the window as we pulled away from the courthouse. What happens to Megan now? The Bar Association's disciplinary hearing is next week. Based on the evidence and today's verdict, disbarment is almost certain. I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness where satisfaction should have been. My sister would lose her law license, her reputation, and possibly face criminal charges of her own for her role in the financial fraud. David would spend up to 15 years in federal prison. James had negotiated a slightly reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against Vincent Castellano, whose trial was scheduled for later in the year. Lives ruined, families shattered, and yet none of it could undo what had been done to me. "Do you want me to take you home?" Marcus asked, breaking into my thoughts. "No," I decided. "The art gallery on Oak Street. I have an appointment." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't question my choice. 20 minutes later, I stood before a renovated warehouse that now housed one of the city's most prestigious art galleries. A sleek sign above the entrance read, "Phoenix Gallery," in elegant gold lettering, my newest venture. Eleanor Chen, the gallery director I'd hired last month, greeted me with a warm smile. Perfect timing. The final installations just arrived. Everything will be ready for Friday's opening. I followed her through the bright, airy space where workers were carefully positioning sculptures and hanging paintings. The gallery represented my fresh start, a passion project funded by my divorce settlement and a small business loan. After years of suppressing my love for art to support David's career, I had finally created something that was entirely mine. The Times arts critic confirmed for the opening, Eleanor continued, checking her tablet. "And we already have inquiries about 3 pieces from the Anderson collection." "Wonderful," I replied, genuinely pleased. The gallery was more than a business venture. It was symbolic of my reinvention. From the ashes of my destroyed marriage and family relationships, I had built something beautiful and meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Saw the news. Celebratory dinner tonight? Jason's cooking." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. 7 p.m.? As I continued my tour of the gallery, I reflected on how my support network had evolved over these tumultuous months. Zoe and Jason had been unwavering pillars of strength. My parents had shown up in ways I never expected, helping me move into my new condo and accompanying me to court dates. Even Robert and Margaret Wilson had maintained contact, our shared pain creating an unlikely but genuine bond. And then there was Diane Harper. In perhaps the most surprising development, she and I had formed a friendship born of mutual trauma and respect. After James's arrest, she had faced her own public ordeal with remarkable dignity. We met for coffee every few weeks, comparing notes on rebuilding our lives and discussing her plans to return to her abandoned career in architecture. "Ms. Wilson?" A young assistant approached hesitantly. "There's someone asking to see you at the front desk. She says it's important." I frowned, not expecting any visitors. Did they give a name? Olivia Palmer. My breath caught. I hadn't seen Olivia since the day of David's confrontation at her apartment 6 months ago. Last I'd heard, she had given birth to a healthy baby girl and was still living with her sister in Denver. "I'll be right there," I told the assistant. I found Olivia waiting in the reception area, looking remarkably different from the woman I'd last seen. Her hair was shorter, her face more relaxed, and beside her was a stroller containing a sleeping infant. "Rachel," she said, rising to greet me. "I hope it's okay that I came by. I saw the news about the verdict, and I wanted to." She paused, searching for words. "I'm not sure what I wanted, actually. To thank you, maybe. Or apologize again. Let's go somewhere we can talk," I suggested, gesturing toward a small private lounge we'd set up for clients. Once seated, Olivia gently adjusted the blanket covering her daughter. "This is Emma," she said softly. "She's 3 months old now." I looked at the peaceful sleeping baby with her tuft of reddish hair, trying to reconcile her innocent existence with the tumultuous circumstances of her conception. "She's beautiful," I said honestly. "How are you doing?" Olivia sighed. "Better. We're staying with my sister permanently now. I found work at a marketing firm in Denver. It's a fresh start for us both." She looked directly at me. "I testified by video conference last month. They didn't need me in person since." Since I was already telling the same story, I finished for her. She nodded. "I wanted you to know I told the complete truth, about everything. The arrangement with David, Megan's involvement, all of it." "I know," I assured her. "The prosecutors told me." An awkward silence fell between us, filled with unspoken acknowledgments of the bizarre connection we shared. We were neither friends nor enemies, but something indefinable. Women whose lives had been irrevocably altered by the same deception. "James sends child support," she offered finally. "His plea deal included provisions for Emma. It's something, at least." I nodded, unsure what to say. The baby stirred, making tiny noises as she began to wake. Olivia instinctively reached for her, lifting her with practiced ease. "I won't take up more of your time," she said, cradling Emma against her shoulder. "I just wanted to see you in person, to say thank you for how you handled everything. You could have thrown me under the bus completely, but you didn't." "We were both deceived," I replied simply. "In different ways, but still." As she prepared to leave, Olivia hesitated. "Have you heard anything about Megan? The news covers David and James, but not much about her. She's facing disbarment next week. Beyond that, I don't know. We haven't spoken since the night of my birthday." Olivia nodded, understanding the finality in my tone. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, no matter how much time passed. After she left, I returned to my office at the back of the gallery, feeling strangely unsettled by the encounter. Seeing Olivia and her baby had reopened questions I'd been avoiding. What would my life look like moving forward? Would I ever trust enough to build a new relationship? Did I still want children of my own? The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, but emotional resolution was proving more elusive. Despite therapy and the passage of time, I still had moments when grief would ambush me. Not for David himself, but for the life I thought we were building together. I was still lost in thought when my phone rang. The screen displayed Mom, and I answered immediately. "Rachel, honey." My mother's voice was uncharacteristically tentative. "Have you seen the news? About the verdict?" "Yes, I was there." "No, not that. It's Megan. There's been an incident." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" "She tried to harm herself," my mother said, her voice breaking. "She's in the hospital. Your father and I are on our way there now." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Despite everything Megan had done, the thought of her in such despair sent a shock through my system. Will she be okay? They think so. She was found in time. Rachel, I know things are beyond complicated between you two, but I thought you should know. I closed my eyes, a tumult of conflicting emotions washing over me. Thank you for telling me. Keep me updated, please. After we hung up, I sat motionless at my desk. Should I go to the hospital? Part of me wanted to. She was still my sister. Still the girl who had taught me to ride a bike and stayed up with me during thunderstorms when we were children. But another part recoiled at the thought of facing her, of reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. In the end, I compromised. I sent a large arrangement of flowers to her hospital room with a simple note. Wishing you healing. R. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't indifference either. It was an acknowledgement of our shared humanity, even in the midst of profound betrayal. That evening, I arrived at Zoe and Jason's home for the promised celebratory dinner. Their warm, chaotic household, complete with 2 energetic children and an elderly golden retriever, was the perfect antidote to the day's emotional turbulence. To justice, Jason proposed, raising his wine glass once we were seated at their dining table. And to new beginnings. To new beginnings, we echoed. As the conversation flowed around me, touching on the gallery opening, the upcoming school year for their kids, and summer vacation plans, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. These moments of normal friendship and laughter had seemed impossible during the darkest days after my birthday dinner revelation. Earth to Rachel, Zoe teased, nudging my arm. You disappeared on us for a minute there. I smiled apologetically. Sorry, it's been a day of unexpected reunions. I told them about Olivia's visit and the news about Megan, watching their expressions shift from surprise to concern. Are you okay? Zoe asked when I'd finished. That's a lot to process on top of the verdict. I'm okay, I said, realizing with some surprise that it was true. 6 months ago, this would have flattened me. Now it just feels like one more turn in a very strange journey. You're the strongest person I know, Zoe declared, squeezing my hand. Later, as we sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint, the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jason asked the question I'd been contemplating myself earlier. So what's next for Rachel Wilson? Beyond the gallery opening, I mean. I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure, and I think that's okay. For so long, my life was defined by my relationship with David, being his wife, trying to start a family with him, supporting his career. Then it was defined by his betrayal and the aftermath. Now I get to define it for myself, one day at a time. Any interest in dating again? Zoe asked tentatively. I laughed. Not yet. I'm enjoying my own company too much right now. Maybe, someday, but I'm in no rush. The truth was, I had learned to appreciate the peace of my new life. My condo with its minimalist decor and the small balcony garden I'd planted. My morning routine of yoga and coffee before heading to the gallery. The freedom to make decisions large and small without considering anyone else's preferences or needs. After years of compromising and accommodating, there was a sweet liberation in answering only to myself. Speaking of the gallery, I said, changing the subject, I hope you're both coming to the opening on Friday. Try and stop us, Jason replied. We've already arranged for a sitter. The conversation drifted to other topics, but my mind kept returning to the question of what came next. The gallery was a professional fresh start, but what about my personal life? What did I want beyond financial security and career satisfaction? I didn't have clear answers yet, but for the first time in months, the uncertainty felt exhilarating, rather than terrifying. 3 days later, I stood in the center of Phoenix Gallery, surveying the transformed space with pride. The opening was an hour away, and everything was perfect. From the carefully curated art collections to the catering to the elegant floral arrangements placed strategically throughout the rooms. Eleanor approached, clipboard in hand. The caterers are all set up, the lighting is adjusted, and the first journalist just arrived. Are you ready? I smoothed the front of my emerald green dress, The same one I'd worn to my fateful birthday dinner, a deliberate choice that symbolized reclamation. Ready. The gallery quickly filled with art collectors, critics, local business owners, and friends. My parents arrived early, my father beaming with pride as he introduced himself to everyone as the father of the visionary behind this place. Zoe and Jason made a dramatic entrance, bearing an enormous bouquet and a bottle of champagne. Even Diane Harper made an appearance, elegant in a simple black dress, offering quiet congratulations. As I circulated among the guests, answering questions about the artists and accepting compliments on the gallery, I caught a glimpse of someone unexpected at the entrance, Robert and Margaret Wilson. Looking slightly out of place but determined, I made my way to them immediately. "I'm so glad you came," I said, genuinely pleased to see them. Margaret embraced me warmly. "We wouldn't have missed it. This is wonderful, Rachel." "Have you heard from David?" I asked softly, knowing they had attended the sentencing hearing. Robert's expression tightened. "He's being processed into the federal system. We'll be able to visit next month." He paused, pain evident in his eyes. "He asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if we were still in touch." "And what did you tell him?" I asked, curious despite myself. "The truth," Margaret answered simply. "That you've been kinder to us than we had any right to expect, given what our son did to you." I squeezed her hand. "You're not responsible for his actions." We parted with promises to meet for lunch soon, and I continued greeting guests and answering questions about the featured artists. The evening was a whirlwind of conversations, congratulations, and even several sales that exceeded our expectations. Near the end of the night, as the crowd began to thin, Eleanor approached with excitement. "The Times critic loved the Anderson collection. He's featuring it in Sunday's paper, and we sold 6 pieces tonight, including the Martin sculpture you buy. We're worried might be too avant-garde for this market." I smiled, taking in the buzzing gallery, the empty wine glasses, the enthusiastic conversations still happening in corners. This success was entirely my own, not attached to David's name or dependent on anyone else's support. I had created something from nothing, transformed pain into purpose. As the last guest departed and the staff began cleaning up, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The spring night was mild, stars visible even through the city lights. I thought about the journey of the past 6 months, from the devastation of my birthday dinner to this moment of triumph. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I still had moments of anger, still occasionally woke from dreams where I was arguing with David or Megan. But those moments no longer defined me. They were just echoes of a past that was receding further with each day. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "So proud of you tonight, sweetheart. Your mother and I always knew you were destined for great things, but you've exceeded even our highest hopes. Love you." I smiled, typing back a heartfelt thanks. Another message appeared, from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. "Congratulations on the gallery opening. Heard it was a success. I'm doing better. Thank you for the flowers. Megan." I stared at the message, unsure how to feel or whether to respond. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't antagonistic either. Just an acknowledgement, perhaps the beginning of some kind of closure for us both. After a moment's hesitation, I typed back, "Thank you. I'm glad you're doing better." It wasn't much, but it was honest. Whether our relationship could ever be repaired in any meaningful way remained to be seen. For now, this small exchange was enough, a tiny bridge across a chasm that had once seemed uncrossable. As I re-entered the gallery to help with the final cleanup, I caught my reflection in one of the large windows. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the one who had stood stunned in Harborview Restaurant 6 months ago, watching her husband's pregnant mistress walk in with her sister. That woman had been blindsided, her identity shattered in an instant. This woman, with her straight posture, steady gaze, and quiet confidence, had been forged in the fire of that betrayal. She had faced public humiliation, legal battles, financial uncertainty, and the collapse of relationships she had thought unbreakable, and she had emerged not just surviving, but flourishing. I thought about what I had told Zoe and Jason about not knowing exactly what came next, and I realized that was perfectly fine. The beauty of this new beginning was that it was entirely unwritten. There were no expectations to fulfill except my own, no path to follow except the one I chose for myself. The gallery was my foundation, but it wasn't the whole structure. There would be more challenges, more decisions, more chapters to this reinvented life. Perhaps someday there would be love again, maybe even a family created in some form. Or perhaps my life would take a completely different direction, with adventures and achievements I couldn't yet imagine. The possibilities stretched before me, like an empty canvas, daunting but full of potential. And for the first time since that fateful birthday, I was genuinely excited to see what pictures I would paint on it. As Eleanor turned off the last of the gallery lights, leaving only the security illumination, she asked, "Ready to go? We can finish the rest tomorrow." I nodded, taking one last look around the space that represented my new beginning. "Yes," I said, feeling the truth of the word deep in my bones. "I'm ready." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.